Good morning, an update on oil. Some concerning trends in retail sales. And then I'm going to follow up on yesterday's video and I'm going to blow your mind if you're a conservative. And if you're not a conservative, this might blow your mind regardless. All right, with oil, this, which apparently looks like market manipulation, is happening again this morning. Not to worry though, the price of oil is almost back down to pre-pandemic levels. Gasoline briefly got above $2 a gallon late last week, but it's falling again this morning. And prices could fall for October. We'll see. All right, we are about 2 weeks away from hitting 42.8 million people. Now, I am sure everyone is well aware of the population explosion that we have had since the end of the pandemic. Well, the retail sales data was released last week. Retail sales for July of 2024. And our flat line continues. That's current dollars, that's inflation adjusted to 2017. Retail sales have been flat for about 2 years, regardless of how you look at it, despite an enormous population explosion. This would indicate that the people coming into the country are either saving their money or sending it back home. They're not spending it here. So has this population explosion been a net benefit for Canada? Not according to the numbers. You can debate it all you want. I'm just saying that according to retail sales, it has been a bust. All right, hang on to your hats. And if you're a conservative supporter, you may want to sit down. This is going to generate so many comments. Yesterday I shared this, measuring the natural rate of interest from the US Fed. And there's two different methodologies. This method over here uses information from the US alone and kind of looks at the US as kind of an island unto itself. This methodology over here looks at the US and Canada and Europe. This method over here says the neutral rate is 1.25% for the US. But this one says it's 0.75. And as I said yesterday, that means 0.75 for Canada and 0.75 for the Eurozone. But you'll note these tabs. You can get more details. So click on that tab. And that breaks it out. The natural rate of interest for the United States, Canada, and the Euro area. You will note that for quite a long time, the natural rate of interest in Canada was higher than the US. It's almost always been higher than the US. Now, it was below the US over here in the 90s, when the Canadian dollar was losing value to the US. That's not what's happening right now. According to this, the neutral rate for Canada is 1.4% if we disregarded the US and the Eurozone. The Eurozone's in the negatives, and the US is at 0.77. When was the last time Canada kind of went on their own and worried about our own dollar more than the US? Oh, back here, after the Great Financial Collapse. The US was at 0.25%, while the Bank of Canada held the rate at 1%. As a result, the Canadian dollar held par with the US dollar. And it stayed that way until Stephen Poloz became the governor of the Bank of Canada. Around here, the oil price collapsed and Stephen Poloz decided to cut the interest rate from 1% to 0.5%. Which, according to this chart, was 1% below the natural rate of interest. And as I said yesterday, if you go below the natural rate of interest, you stimulate the economy. Coincidentally, home prices started to skyrocket. And remember, Stephen Harper was the prime minister at the time. Who was the ballsy fellow before Stephen Poloz that kept the rate high and drove our dollar value to par with the US? Mark Carney. You know, it's funny. Back then, Mark Carney was amazing because Stephen Harper was the prime minister. Now that people have found out that Mark Carney's a liberal, now he's a WEF puppet. Who knew? The question is the Bank of Canada ballsy enough to maintain the rate higher than the US as they did back there after the Great Financial Collapse? Because right now, the natural rate of interest is 75 basis points higher than the US. People argue with me when I say we suppress our dollar value. There it is in numbers. There it is in history. For pretty much 2 decades, we should have had an interest rate higher than the US. But the only time we did it was when Mark Carney was the Bank of Canada governor. What does that mean for housing? Well, as I said, back here, when the neutral rate was less than the US, the Canadian dollar lost value. Now, the Canadian dollar should gain value if the Bank of Canada has the balls to allow it to happen. That means that even if prices stagnate for the next decade, you're going to gain value in your property because the Canadian dollar value is going to grow. Is there someone in the government with the know-how and the influence to make that happen? Not really, because Mark Carney is not officially a member of the government. The US is coming down to that natural rate of interest. They are. Will Tiff Macklem have the balls to keep us 75 basis points higher? We shall see.